All right, let's bring in our panel on this conversation. We've got Richard Brodsky, former New York State Assemblyman, Senior Fellow at Demos, Professor at NYU, Dominic Carter, political journalist and author, Mark Furnish, Professor at Brooklyn Law, an attorney who's argued before the Supreme Court. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Richard St. Paul, Republican strategist and former Vice Chair for the National Black Republican Association. And you met Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent. Okay. Give everybody a little history lesson who the late Senator Frank Church was and why he applies to this conversation.
Well, there's nothing new about this debate. Back when Senator Church was looking at the CIA and repeatedly after that.
In the early 70s.
The question of the extent to which the government could know about its citizens has always been debated. I'm always struck by the fact that the same right-wingers who are complaining about the loss of liberty under Obamacare are fine with this national security state poking around in everybody's private
But one of the things he found out, Frank Church, was that the idea of unchecked power of any government always, without exceptions, leads to abuses, even if it started with good intentions.
The supporters of this program would not disagree with that. They would say, but there are checks. It's the FISA court, and there are other things going on. The problem here is the strange relationship between Snowden, the character, and Snowden, the historical figure. If you liked Daniel Ellsberg when he released classified information about the war in Vietnam, you have to like Snowden.
No, you don't.
Sure you do. You can't pick and choose which.
One ran off to Hong Kong and is now sitting in Moscow talking to go over to Venezuela or whatever
Snowden,
next. That's not Ellsberg.
That's Snowden, the character. The question of whether or not this is a whistleblower or a traitor can't be based upon whether you like or dislike the substance of the information.
I'm not buying it at all. Yeah. I mean, this man is the subject of criminal charges. He's a fugitive
So
from
was
justice.
Ellsberg.
Here's the deal. If you want to say I'm a whistleblower, I'm acting in the public good, come into the tribunal, present your defense, and a jury will decide. That's the way we defend things in this country. We don't run to Cuba. We don't run to Russia. We don't run to Hong Kong, those great defenders of freedom. We answer the charges. We stand up,
and you don't between the lines say, oh, by the way, I have the names of all the undercover agents here in harm's way. You don't, by the way, drop that as an aside. I mean, I know Ellsberg.
But people defended themselves in various ways. I don't know enough about Snowden to like or dislike him. But the question is, did he do the nation a service or did he not do the nation a service?
Okay, take him out of it for a second, because I don't find him as interesting as the broader subject.
How could you find him interesting? He's a high school dropout, just like you said.
He's not. But to me, the interesting question, though, is now he's going to go to a tangent. You had to go there. Here's my point.
He's not Abby Hoffman.
Okay, but here is my point. With what you know about the program, Mr. Great Defender of the Fourth Amendment and the protections it allows.
No Fourth Amendment problem with the program as written. The potential Fourth Amendment problem is when, inevitably, this information is used to prosecute domestic crimes, because the line between terrorist crimes and domestic criminal activity has already been blurred. We're having a debate in this country whether these terrorist crimes should be prosecuted in military tribunals or before civilian courts. It's only a matter of time, if it's not happening already, that they're not using this information to evade the requirements of the domestic wiretapping statute, which is Title III of the Organized Crime Control and Safe Streets Act of 1968. That law needs to be modernized so that we bring it up into the digital age.
But because Zachary mentioned a point, which was, hey, listen, it's not like the government's going rogue here. They're going directly to the private, to the independent providers. But already Google and Yahoo and the rest said, we didn't want to give up the records, but we had a choice of either go along or break the law and face huge penalties here. So it's not like everybody willingly is saying, so please take my documents. There's very little choice right now, at least the way the law is interpreted.
Well, they have these national security letters, the NSLs, with gag order provisions in them that Google and these other ISPs can't even tell anybody that they received a letter like this.
Mr. Conservative, okay, Mr. Republican, the guy who doesn't like your government overreach, do you have a problem with the program where a Republican or a Democrat administration can have these broader powers in a post-9/11 world?
Look, at the end of the day, we have to make sure that this country is safe, and how we do it without infringing on the Constitution is the foremost important factor. We've got to make laws that come into this digital age. Right now, we're looking at.
I got a question for you.
We're looking at drones.
Richard, I got a
we're
question
looking at
for you.
drones.
Fair enough.
The police department, your local police department, can have drones now looking at you and following you.
National security letter. He talks about it. More than 15,000 were issued last year. in a national security letter, if I want to check out about you, you don't even know the letter exists. And I say, okay, I'm going to go to your local bank. Mark, please turn over all the records. I'm going to go to the library. He's going to tell me all the books you read here. I'm going to go to your employer. And I'm going to say, by the way, I'm checking into this guy here. I want to know everything about Richard here. Tell me about his habits and everything else. You are none the wiser. They don't have to check with anybody. They just basically sign the name at the bottom and they go ahead. Are you comfortable with that?
If the person is the subject of the investigation and they have a
But they
legitimate
don't need to show
reason for
probable cause?
if
They
they-
don't need to have a warrant?
if they are subject to investigation, then yes, the police have the right to investigate. There's nothing wrong with that. We're set up for that. The problem I have with this, and the reason why, going back to the point of Senator Dombrowski, is, Snowden, time will tell, but he certainly, if not anything, showed us what gaps we have when hiring outside contractors to deal with our security. So certainly we've made improvements
But we've
there.
seen with the private Mannings and the rest, it's not just the outside contractors. We live in a day and an age right now where I don't
Well,
even want
he certainly showed us,
yeah.
and we've certainly cleared up some of the stuff, so
Yes.
this won't happen again where we won't have another
I don't
Snowden
know about
at least
that,
soon
but yeah.
enough. The other thing is that the amount of information that is being subject to review is tremendous. And I hope that the change will be made that it won't be a massive amount
Yep.
of information, but it will be more subjective.
Well, let me ask you two guys this last question, Tom and Andrew, which is the reaction since this story broke. I happened to be in Europe last week, and the cover of The Guardian, the cover of all the papers in the UK, every day, not only on this story, but even localizing what is. And it would be jump pages, 4 pages in the front section of every paper just on this issue. Here, I'm not overstating it, a little bit of a collective shrug to say either, well, what can you do about it, or the line we always hear, well, if you got to do nothing wrong, what do you have to worry about? It drives me crazy when I hear that, but I hear that. Do you think, since this has come out, beyond the geopolitical problems in getting this guy back, domestically, the public's that upset about the revelations of at least how broad this program is?
I think the American public are taking, Richard, a wait-and-see approach. I think that people, I know certainly myself, looked at Mr. Snowden to begin with as somewhat of a hero. But now he's just starting to come across as a bad traitor. And I do raise the question of, how does someone with that education level reach this type of clearance? It is absolutely ridiculous.
Einstein and Snowden both dropped out of high school. What's your point?
But the point, Richard, is this guy has top security clearance, and now he's starting to sound almost like he's the CIA
so he's connecting
director.
the program to Snowden, okay?
That you have to connect it to him.
How do you think?
He's not the issue.
But
the issue is the national debate about what's an appropriate level of government intrusion. He precipitated it.
But I think that's one of the reasons why we haven't had that debate yet, is because the story has been framed in terms of where's Snowden and the whole spy mystery angle of the whole thing. You may be right on that. Also, don't forget, it was first brought up as, another scandal for the Obama White House and, secrets that he didn't reveal. So I don't think the American people have really been presented this story in the terms that I think a lot of us would like to see it presented in order to foster that debate.
All right. When we come back here, we're going to talk about Washington, but in this case, the highest court of our land, where they weighed in on affirmative action, but it wasn't as simple as just a yes or no. It was a subtle, yet potentially significant decision. We'll talk about that and the whole issue in 2013 after this. Stay with us.